Today on Callout, Nelson SAR teams up with a psychic in the search for a missing woman.
If there was a chance it would work, we were willing to give it a try.
And later, Canadian Forces SAR helicopter pilot candidates fly high-tech simulators and perform a live hoist from a moving vessel.
So we know we're going to blow that boat around a lot. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Saturday, 3 p.m., early spring. Nelson SAR is called out for the second time now to search for a young, despondent female who's been missing for 6 days. The woman's car was found abandoned in a parking lot near a popular hiking area. Today's search is based on some new information.
Well, we were told by Nelson City Police that a psychic had communicated with the subject and that her body would be found in this area.
That psychic is local resident Norm Pratt, who felt compelled to get involved after following the case in the media and then hearing from the subject.
I started feeling like this girl was dead, that she was in spirit, and pretty soon she was coming to me and actually communicating with me and asking me to find her.
Norm places a call to the detective in charge of the investigation.
After 6 days into the investigation, they'd basically exhausted all the usual avenues. They'd used search and rescue teams to go look where this girl's car was found. They'd had a helicopter with an infrared actually to try to pick up body heat. They took in a dog handler from the RCMP with a search dog. So he was really kind of open to anything. And the moment that I called him, he had just made the decision to try to find a psychic. When he went to pick up the phone, I was on the other end of the line.
I have some information that might be of service.
The day before I phoned the police, I had a vision of a helicopter flying over this mountainside, and that's what we did. We went up, and sure enough, I did recognize the area from the air and saw where I felt this girl was. We threw some flagging tape out into the trees around it so that the detective and I would be able to find it when we did a ground search. So we basically bushwhacked up through really dense old-growth forest, up a steep mountainside, what started out as knee-deep snow and became thigh-deep snow pretty quickly. And when we did turn around and come back, I felt her telling me that I'd walked right past her. And we tried to retrace our steps, but it was really hard to find even our tracks in the snow because there were a lot of elk and deer tracks, and it was kind of broken up where we were.
Norm suggests they bring ground SAR back in to do a detailed grid search. For Nelson Search and Rescue, it was the first time the subject's point last seen had been determined by a psychic's vision.
Hey, it was different, but if there was a chance it would work, we were willing to give it a try.
The coordinator of Search and Rescue wasn't incredibly pleased when he found out that the search area had been determined by a psychic.
The oddest part, really, was he wanted us to search higher and higher in deeper snow. Typically, subjects take the path of least resistance. They go downhill, look for shelter.
They went in and they did a really good grid search of the area, and they went right up basically into the area that I designated.
And found nothing. Norm begins to doubt himself.
When that search was finished, and they hadn't found anything, I thought, well, maybe I'm wrong, and could be wrong. And that's not what this girl was telling me in spirit or what I felt, but it's easy to question yourself, especially when there's no results to show for what you're doing.
Nonetheless, Norm continues to search on occasion, sometimes alone, sometimes with the Nelson police detective, who still believes in Norm's intuition.
Other people had sort of given up on the investigation, and he and I were basically keeping it alive and wanted to do everything we could to find her.
Norm keeps hearing from the girl, feeling her energy.
The feeling of energy building up is like when you have somebody pestering you to some degree, where if you're not paying attention, they're going to keep at you, and they're going to keep trying to get your attention. And it was like, I need to do something, or I'm not going to be able to sleep.
It's now late fall. Norm has looked for the missing woman often, and today prepares to go out for his last search of the year.
I could feel energy sort of coming up again, that it just felt like before it snows again, before winter, I need to go in there and take a look for this girl. We don't want to leave her up there for a whole winter.
Norm put something special in his pack.
Just prior to that, the detective had given me a box of this girl's belongings so that I could sort of handle them and get a sense of her, and that didn't really work for me, but I decided to throw a shoe of hers in the backpack. It was interesting that he was willing to give me the box because he said normally we don't release any sort of evidence to the public or anybody. But at that point, he and I had probably gone on about 5 or 6 different searches together, and you definitely form a bond.
Norm heads out on the search with a friend. Unlike search and rescue teams, however, he quite willingly allows himself to get lost in the woods.
In getting lost, I'm not using my mind anymore. It's like I've sort of given up. I'm sort of just surrendering it over to, the intuitive process and allowing myself to just be guided.
Then, it happens.
Lo and behold, as we were hiking through the woods, I found a shoe. And I pulled the shoe out of my backpack and looked at this shoe on the ground, and they were the same size. It was a girl's shoe, and I knew immediately it was hers because the energy got so intense at me finding that shoe that I started to vibrate and then started to cry. It was just so intense to find, and we'd been waiting for that for a long time.
It seems the girl had trudged through the ever-deepening snow up into the forest, then taken off all of her clothing at the base of the tree.
One of the things that she told me was that when she did that, she had hung her blue coat over a branch to flag my attention. When we found her stuff, that coat had fallen onto the ground, but it had a branch right through it. You could see on the tree where the branch had broken off over time, probably got wet from rain or something. Underneath the coat were her clothes all neatly folded.
The police document the evidence. A week later, Norm returns with the detective to search again. This time, they find a bone.
Intuitively, I knew immediately it was a femur because my leg started to vibrate. So I told the detective, this is her. This is her bone.
DNA analysis eventually confirms this. The very next day, snow falls heavy and winter begins. The following spring, Norm and the detective are out searching again. This time, things move very quickly.
We were in the one area kind of searching through some pretty heavy undergrowth, and I saw a stick on the ground, and the way it was shaped, I thought it was a rib. And I leaned down to get it and realized, no, it's just a stick. But right away, the detective looked about 5 feet away from where I was and pointed and said, that's her.
The girl has been found. It's not a happy ending, but like all SAR recoveries, it brings some closure to the family and to those involved in the search. Norm has given kindly of his time and is here to help.
I've been really pleased to be able to volunteer and give my time to assist with different missing person cases, but I've worked on cases where I wasn't able to get anything and we weren't able to find the person, and they still haven't been found. But anytime I ever work with somebody that has what I call passed into spirit, they never go away. This girl comes to me all the time, comes to me today, comes to me right now while we're speaking.
Next, military pilots train to fly the Cormorant. Tuesday, 8 a.m., Royal Air Force Base, Benson, England. 3 Canadian search and rescue helicopter pilot candidates are here to fly a highly sophisticated $25 million full-motion helicopter simulator. It's part of a demanding 3-month course for experienced pilots training to fly the Cormorant, a helicopter dedicated solely to search and rescue in Canada. 2 months into the course now, and the pilots have logged several hours on the Cormorants at CFB Comox on Vancouver Island, British Columbia, perfecting a steady hover and hoisting SAR technicians in and out of confined areas. They've also practiced in the cockpit procedures trainer at 442 Squadron, But it's no match for the full-motion simulator. With its state-of-the-art graphic and data displays, hyper-realistic sound and motion response, and 270-degree wraparound environments providing a full range of flight training scenarios. From takeoff, landing, and normal flying situations to adverse conditions and severe emergencies, lessons learned here translate into success and survival on search and rescue missions back in Canada.
Canadian search and rescue pilots come and see me every 6 to 8 months, and the nature of the simulator sessions here is to cover emergencies that we can't cover in the real aircraft. So things like engine failures, fires, transmission failures. So it gives us an opportunity to control the aircraft in stressful situations and making sure we handle the emergencies in an appropriate fashion.
Today's emergency, Captain James Luce must deal with a tail rotor malfunction. The anti-torque pedals are jammed, making the helicopter difficult to steer.
No, pedals still unresponsive. Okay, I'm going to put those back in.
It doesn't happen often, but the result can be deadly.
Okay, so
being prepared is half the
does that
battle.
improve the situation at all? No, pedals are unresponsive. Okay, so we'll clear that.
The purpose of the tail rotor is to counteract the effect of torque on the helicopter as the main rotor turns. The tail rotor pushes against the force of the horizontal rotation and effectively points the helicopter in the direction of travel.
901 requesting immediate landing runway 19.
If the tail rotor stops working, the helicopter will begin to spin out of control. The pilot must perform an auto-rotation. First, he will ease back on the engine power, slowing the rotation of the main rotor blades and lowering the torque so the helicopter will be less inclined to turn, or yaw. Then, he'll feather the angle of the main rotor blades to maintain lift and avoid dropping too quickly, while gliding the helicopter in for an emergency landing. The higher the altitude of the helicopter, the more precious seconds the pilot has to take evasive action and survive.
Well, it's pretty realistic training. It's nice because when you do an emergency, you're not just pretending to push the switch and say, I would be doing this. You actually get to do it. And we take the emergency to a full logical conclusion.
Generally speaking, by the time they leave the scenario sessions with me, they will be brought up to a level 3 on all the emergency situations they encounter. And a level 3 means they might make some minor errors during the procedure, but nothing that ruins the effectiveness of how they're handling that emergency.
There, right. You're 42 knots. Try and tuck that nose forward. 6 feet, 5 feet. Touch it down.
So we've got a pedal jam in the hover here. So is it working? Nope.
In simulator number 2, pilots Captain Will Livingston and Captain Jay Hall are also dealing with stuck tail rotor pedals, but they are holding in a low hover, which leaves less time to deal with the malfunction.
You're going to see what the pedals are doing. You're going to touch the micro switches to see if that works.
Cormorant instructor Captain Stu Irvine, who has accompanied the students to this training facility in Britain, helps the pilots work through this emergency scenario.
So there you go. You do have some control there, all right?
It's all about diagnostics, troubleshooting, problem solving, and understanding exactly how the Cormorant works. During an actual in-flight emergency, these procedures must be done instinctively.
The most difficult sim thus far was the tail rotor malfunctions, just because of the nature of the types of flying and the precision involved with some of the maneuvers.
25.
It's a great opportunity for us to come over here. Just trying to take as much as I can from all these sessions. We're seeing a lot of new emergencies, and it was a lot of fun.
The pilots return to Comox, where Cormorant pilot candidate Captain Jay Hall is about to attempt his first live hoist from a moving vessel at sea. The exercise has 3 components: a simple hover, a hover with an empty hook, and a hover with live personnel on the cable. Jay must ace them all.
Once we're committed, we'll make a right-hand turn for our circuit. Any questions? What does committed mean?
On Jay's left and watching his every move is the aircraft commander and Cormorant instructor, Captain Stu Irvine.
Okay.
He teaches me on the ground, we brief, and then we go up in the air and he'll demo it and he'll show me how it's done, and then it's monkey see, monkey do, and then while I'm doing it, he's He's just giving me tips and pointers to make it better and make it easier. Once you get to a certain level, you know, if things are going well, he'll sit there and hopefully he won't have too much to say.
15 kilometers offshore from CFB Comox in the Strait of Georgia, the Cormorant meets the MV Albatross, a Canadian Navy vessel assigned to today's exercise. At the helm of the vessel is Petty Officer Second Class Michel Tremblay.
I would say we do this at least 3-4 times a week. We do at night as well.
Also on board the vessel is Cormorant helicopter pilot student Captain Will Livingston, who will observe this challenging rescue procedure from a different angle.
So for us, it's an opportunity to see the effects of the helicopter on the boat, what the SAR techs are doing, as well as what the FD are doing, all from a different perspective.
They like a bit of wind, so they always do the exercise with their nose in the wind. So we're going to face the wind going to this direction, and no, today's nice. There's a bit of wave from the wind of yesterday, but that's about it.
And you will get to a point where you get over top of the boat and you will lose references with the boat. So, immediately call lost contact. Okay. That lets the flight engineer know you can no longer see the boat. Yeah, okay. All right?
The effect of the Cormorant on small boats is considerable. The intense downwash from the helicopter's rotors actually blows the vessel off course, making it even more of a moving target for the pilot.
Depending on the pilots, if they're new, they're going to push us a bit more, but if they're good pilots, usually training goes pretty well.
The helicopter's hovering beautifully right here. We're following the boat. We're not going anywhere from it, all right? Just little pressures, little pressures.
Jay is successful at consistently hovering the Cormorant over the moving vessel, so instructor Captain Irvine gives the green light to move on to the next challenge, hovering with an empty hook directly over the back of the boat without it swaying back and forth.
Because there's such a dynamic relationship between the helicopter and the boat, we have to make practice runs. We do as many practice runs as it takes until the SAR techs in the back are comfortable that they're willing to put their lives literally on the line before the pilot takes them to the boat.
How do you feel? Good. Feels not bad, huh?
After several minutes of holding the cable steady over the deck of the vessel, the flight engineer and SAR techs are confident that Jay is up for the task of lowering personnel.
All right, I check. It'll be single, and you have the con, and when you're ready, we'll move us overhead and get this done.
A single refers to having only one person on the end of the cable. The flight engineer performs a safety check on a SAR tech and prepares to lower him on the hoist. In a real emergency, a stretcher or medical supplies might be sent down along with the medics. With an unobstructed view of the target, the flight engineer cons or controls the aircraft into position by calling out distances and updating the pilot on what the SAR tech is doing.
5, 4, 3, 2, steady forward, stretchers on the deck.
Today, the conditions are ideal for training, but on actual rescue missions, the Cormorant pilots must perform this maneuver while the vessel is moving erratically in heavy seas and gusty crosswinds. With Jay tracking the vessel in a steady hover, the second SAR tech is lowered down to the deck.
Hold up. See those two SAR techs down there? Yeah, you put them there. Working.
The SAR techs are hoisted up to the Cormorant one after the other. Captain Jay Hall is about to complete his first challenging training exercise over water.
All right, guys, we're done. You have control, Jay? I have control. Turning right and taking it back towards the base, please. Good. Turbo crew to front.
Albatross copy. You guys have a nice flight. Have a good weekend. Over.
You too. Cabin area secure. Rescue doors pinned up and SAR check is complete. You're right to fly, sir.
With the cabin and crew secure, Jay pulls the Cormorant up out of the hover and heads back to base. where instructor Captain Stu Irvine will review his performance.
The exercise this afternoon was to see how he handled boat hoisting. This is his first attempt at it. The conditions were good, so the boat wasn't perfectly calm. It was moving around a little bit, and he did really well.
It was challenging. It's probably the easiest boat I'll ever do. It was big, nice and stable, and there was absolutely no sea state out there whatsoever, but it was a lot of work. It took me an hour and a half to get it in, but got her done, and it's Friday, so we're going to go have a beer and probably watch hockey now.
During the last month of the Cormorant pilot course at 442 Squadron, all 3 candidates went on to master boat hoisting and completed numerous training missions at night. Each candidate successfully qualified as a first officer and is now flying a Cormorant helicopter on search and rescue missions.
It's good to be done the course. You know, you work hard to get to this point, and it's finally came, so it's good. It's good to be part of the team. So far in the 2 weeks I've been operational. I've been up to Sitka, Alaska. I've seen Whitehorse, and we did a mission out to Bella Coola. So it's been exciting.
Today on Callout, Rossland SAR is on a late-night search for 2 missing skiers.
They might be there and we're hoping for the best.
And later, it's man versus nature for Comox Valley SAR rookies.
It rained probably 1.5 inches to 2 inches last night, just torrential downpour.
Saturday, 9:40 p.m. Rossland and District Search and Rescue is coordinating a late-night mission from its mobile command center. 2 experienced backcountry skiers are missing near the Red Mountain Resort, located 3 kilometers north of town. Area residents Bob Reardon and Marie-Claude Germain were reported overdue when they didn't show up for a 7 p.m. dinner engagement. Local RCMP have pinged both subjects' cell phones.
Well, that's great. That helps us a lot.
Marie-Claude's cell has sent back a signal to the closest cell tower, which is located on the top of Red Mountain, placing her phone somewhere along a 2-kilometer radius of the tower.
We went to the map table and drew a compass circle. With that information, it showed a couple sites of intense bush at the bottom of the mountain in places people could be lost. The ping has set us on this radius. We've got an area here at the base of Roberts, which we're going to have to look at. We have an area over here at the base of Gray. Let's get teams on both those to start. That's our highest probability, and we'll check all the perimeter.
Members on skis, snowshoes, and snowmobiles are sent into the night to search the 2 high-probability areas, which are difficult to access. Meanwhile, trucks equipped with sirens and flashing lights drive along service roads with the goal of drawing out the missing subjects.
We're hoping to sound and track them. Our probability is very high that they might be there and we're hoping for the best.
The search continues late into the night with no result. SAR managers begin to suspect that the subject may not be carrying her cell phone.
Real high probability now.
We'd searched the area thoroughly enough that if they were in the area where the ping was, they would have heard or seen us and we would have found them already.
2 a.m. Dave decides to call the teams back to base and stand down for the night.
6:30 or 7 tomorrow morning.
With temperatures hovering around -15 degrees Celsius and a forecast calling for more snow, hypothermia is a major concern, as is dehydration.
Once someone becomes dehydrated, they start losing their senses and definitely do not think clearly, so it's a real concern. If you eat snow, it uses more energy than you get from it. You become more dehydrated.
Day 2, 7:05 a.m. The clouds have cleared, giving hope that the missing subjects will be able to find their way out, if they've survived the chilly night. Approximately 40 members from Rossland, Castlegar, South Columbia, and Nelson SAR are responding to the call-out. To accommodate the extra troops, the mission is being staged from one of the parking lots at the Red Mountain Resort. As the teams sign in and gear up, the RCMP once again attempt to trace Marie-Claude's cell phone. This time, the ping locates the phone exactly 1.2 kilometers from the cell tower on Red Mountain.
I happened to know where the subject's house was, and when we drew that circle on the map, the line went right through the house.
A constable from the RCMP drives to Marie-Claude's house and confirms what Dave had been suspecting for a while.
She phoned and heard the phone ringing and said, the phone is in the house, they're not here. And that's when we threw the pinging and the cell phone out the window and continued.
Yeah, okay, and...
All we knew was that they had their turn gear and hadn't came back. They could have easily gone off the backside of Grey, or off Kirkup, or off Record, or any of the other mountains which lead into different drainages. So we had to basically check every drainage to look for tracks to see if someone was where they shouldn't be.
Teams on skis and snowshoes are airlifted by helicopter to remote areas.
We sent teams up to all the mountaintops. The winds had come up and it had blown the tracks away off the ridgetop, so we had to drop below the ridgetop down to tree line to look for tracks going in the wrong direction where people do not normally ski.
Since there are no radio repeaters on these outlying mountains, snowmobile teams are deployed along Sheep Creek to relay communication between the command center and teams on the ground.
We'll be contacting sled team down in Sheep Creek once you drop.
For this search mission, local knowledge of the terrain is extremely valuable.
Being local, you know where people usually go, and you know where they don't go. So what we look for is what's out of normal, what's unusual. Where is it that this doesn't look quite right? If you don't know what the normal is, you wouldn't know which track to follow, and there's lots of them going everywhere.
12:11 p.m. The two subjects have been missing for 24 hours now. SAR managers decide to expand the search further north into the outer limits of Grey Mountain.
As we were dropping a team off on a remoter ridge line, we noticed tracks went beyond any normal ski track and down into the creek.
Yeah, and you'll see some fresh tracks going right over the top of them there. Perfect, follow those fresh tracks.
The tracks look very promising. However, they appear to be entering very steep and dangerous terrain.
Gnarly terrain. Very, yeah. Oh, there's a help. That was good to see. Yeah, they were thinking.
As we followed those tracks, we saw help written in the snow in large letters, and then we knew we were on them, and we just kept following the boot tracks until we spotted them.
Search space, this is Delta.
Delta, you're coming in 5x5. This is command, go ahead.
We can stand down everyone else and bring them all home, and we'll do a heli evac as to their location.
After notifying SAR base, the helicopter drops off the ground SAR members in the closest clearing, about a 25-minute trek from the subjects, and returns to the staging area to avoid wasting fuel. The snowmobile teams, acting as radio repeaters in Sheep Creek, stand by for the call. Nearly an hour later, word finally comes through that they are ready for pickup.
Whether they've located the subjects or not?
Yes, they have. Yes.
Dave and the helicopter pilot return to the pickup point and move in for a hover entry. The pilot carefully places one skid on the ground, and the passengers slowly ease themselves in.
Well done. It's sure good to see you guys.
They were a bit dehydrated, they were hungry, they were cold, but in all good form, they were in great shape, and they were ecstatic that we found them. And they came to the command center, and we chatted about what happened and what they did and what they might do in the future.
We started down, and somehow we got veered off to the left. And
Bob and Marie-Claude had set out to do one run down the east side of Grey Mountain. But when they were slammed by a snow squall, they skied down the wrong side and found themselves at the bottom of a ravine with no way out.
I felt frustrated, but at the same time I kind of decided that we had to stay for the night.
There wasn't enough snow to dig out a snow cave, so they made a bed of branches to protect them from the cold.
Within maybe 15, 20 minutes, we realized we couldn't warm up, so that wasn't a good idea. We worried about hypothermia and decided that we just had to stay up all night and warm up.
They spent the next 14 hours coming up with some very creative ways to stay warm.
We did some dancing. I had my iPhone, which was good for nothing else but music, so we did have music, and spent the whole night there and on a little path we had down to another tree that we used. We called it our gym, and just bent branches and swung. We probably spent 4 hours in that tree.
Basically, that's how we're able to keep warm, as well as walking back and forth, you know, up a little hill.
At first light, they began ascending the steep ravine to get over to the other side of the mountain. When they came to a small opening in the trees, Marie-Claude decided to carve out a help sign with her ski pole.
I started panicking for sure. It would have been difficult for me to spend another night in the cold, without food, and with little energy left.
Fortunately, search and rescue found them soon after.
When we spotted them, we all did high fives and everyone was elated. When you can get them alive, that's what we're after. We want live finds, and we're willing to go out at night, anytime, in any weather, and we're trained to do it.
Now, it's man versus nature as Comox Valley SAR rookies learn to survive in the wild.
Why bring the branches if I could bring the whole tree?
I'm going to hike with him.
If you ever find yourself stranded overnight in the wilderness, how much survival knowledge you have may ultimately determine whether or not you'll make it out alive. And that's no different for search and rescue crews, who brave the most remote areas to find missing persons.
This is something that is a mandatory part of our basic search and rescue course. If we're going to drop these people off in places, and around here we use helicopters a fair bit, so we'll fly them in the mid-afternoon into an area. You know, the plan is we'll bring them back out at the end of the day, but quite often they'll end up spending the night.
I've got a bunch of different things for...
Therefore, search and rescue crews on a call-out always carry packs loaded with survival gear, including fire starters, first aid kits, and tarps.
So we like to see, as a minimum, everybody has a 24-hour amount of kit.
Today, Comox Valley SAR members are on Vancouver Island's Mount Washington to learn how to stay warm and keep dry, using only what they've got on hand.
There's something that I've wanted to do a lot, and I do like being outside, and I've camped, but I've never had to go off on my own like this. I'd like to be prepared for that.
32 years of service in the forces. I had experience with fires, but I never knew what kind of wood it was, like fir, cedar was best, or like details like this, I didn't know.
Surviving a night out on the Canadian West Coast, known for its wet climate, hinges primarily on two things: making a fire and building a shelter. To make a substantial fire that will last through the night, three types of material are needed: tinder, which easily ignites with a small spark; kindling, which keeps the flame going; and wood, which fuels the fire.
So we come over here and we're looking at, in this tree, this kind of moss. This stuff works okay. This is what's called old man's beard. See the lighter yellowy color?
And
that's
it
fallen
looks
out of
dry,
the tree.
too.
It does, yeah.
Yeah.
And if there does happen to be any moisture in it, you give it a shake and all the moisture comes out, and put it underneath as you're kindling, and you light this stuff and the flame just goes right through it in a hurry.
Partially decomposed stumps are also great for starting a fire quickly. A stump can be hollowed out and its shavings used as tinder and kindling.
Which also burns really well. So if, in a pinch, this stuff, if you took it and shredded it with your knife really fine, it'll start going pretty good. One of the things you can do is you get a stump like this. We could actually set fire to this stump, and that stump would burn probably for 14 or 16 hours. So we could pile some wood on it and make a really nice fire. So looking at this tree, see how nice and high up it is? So it's been kept off of the ground. If it's on the ground, it's going to get really wet. And a lot of times what happens is this bark will act as a bit of a shield. When you pull this stuff off, the stuff that's on the bottom will actually be fairly dry.
One way of telling which variety of tree burns well is by smelling its resin, also known as pitch.
Smell of fir. That's great stuff. Fir has a fairly high smell, and the smell is produced by the pitch. And the pitch is what burns really, really well. So if you get something that smells really strong and kind of like turpentine sort of smell, that's where you get a really good burning wood. So fir is the one that smells strong. And the best wood for starting a fire is usually cedar. And cedar is a very strong smelling, quick burning wood. So good for starting a fire, but it won't hold a fire for very long at all. Nice and light wood. Now the next thing you can look at with this kind of a tree, to get the fire going, you may cut a couple of small chunks and then split it. So use your axe splitter.
SAR members are often advised to collect 2 or 3 times the amount of wood they think they will need to survive the long, cold night. Running out of firewood at 3 a.m. can be dangerous.
When we're cutting firewood for the fire, normally what you'll do is you'll cut about whatever size you could carry. So if you could grab one end of it and drag a 6-foot chunk, that's probably the size you would put, just to save on the amount of cutting. Right. And then once the fire is built, you put the end into the fire, and then you just keep moving it forward as you go. Yeah. Well, then let's do ours. This that Chris is doing is called feathering, a very handy way to turn a piece of wood into a starting stick. I'm going to use one of the chemical starters, one little cube, usually more than enough to get a fire going. So put it in as our base. And then as it burns, we're going to add little bits of wood to it in a short, small time so that we don't put so much wood that it goes out, but not so little that it burns out before it gets to the next level. And we have a fire that now, we can now go to this size stick and keep going more and more and more, and we'll have a good sized fire to go for the night.
While the trainees were learning about fire, survival course assistants Deb and Oli have been building rudimentary shelters using only a tarp, some rope, and a little bit of imagination.
This is probably one of our favorite shelters here in this area of the coast. Notice how what they've done is they found a pole, lashed it between the 2 trees so it's tied up nice and tight, and they've put the tarp over top of it. They've lined the bottom with some insulative material. The fire would go right here. So you've got a spot where you can lay 3 or 4 people and you've got a good shelter.
There are many things to look for when building a shelter. SAR members have to note wind direction and the potential for it to change overnight. It's also important to be aware of surrounding trees. If they're old and damaged, their branches may snap and crash to the ground. As for location, ideal ones are on higher ground to avoid flooding, but close to a source of drinking water and near a clearing for helicopter evacuation.
Okay, let's go have a look at a little different...
After seeing the single-pole shelter example, the trainees move over to see a smaller tripod version that is slightly more complicated, but better for colder, more extreme conditions.
So to build this one, you take your 2 cross pieces here that you see at the front and add a 3rd. So there's 2 crossed right straight up and down on the front with a pole that goes on the back.
That would be standard. We decided we'd like a little bit more structural support.
So these are the 2 that we want you guys to know how to do. Okay. So pick, when you actually go to build your shelter for tonight, pick one of the 2 to build.
I'm ready.
With dusk fast approaching, the trainees must now square off and see who can build a campsite fastest.
There's a spot with some logs, so I think we can make a shelter there.
Team A's priority is finding a location.
I like this spot because it's nice and flat.
Yeah.
There's not too many big, huge trees that are downfalling, and there's a bit of a windbreak.
Right. Well, and it's not a real low spot, right? So we're not going to get water if the rain comes back.
It's fairly high, it's fairly smooth and level. Won't take too much to clean it up, so we can get some place to lay down. So we're going with the tripod that has the 2 cross sticks and the main pole going down towards the back end of this open area. The wind is a southeaster tonight and it's going to be whipping up, so we want to make sure, first of all, there's no dead trees that can snap off and hit us in the head.
Team B, which is prioritizing fire, looks for tinder.
Grab that old man's beer right there.
Yeah, you can see them picking it up as we go along. The light's coming on a few times with some of the stuff we've done. Even some of the people that have experience learning new stuff. A lot of fun as an instructor to see that.
You see the difference? The one here is dry and this one is all wet. But they say it should start the fire anyway.
We can even make that a little bit narrower.
Oh yeah, make it taller? Oh, lower, okay.
Factoring in the weather, Team B switches gear and decide to set up a single pole shelter before gathering firewood.
We know that the rain's coming, so we gotta get our beds ready.
Finally, it's gonna turn out pretty good.
Sorry, make the fire right here.
Oh yeah. The tarp here after.
Oh, you got the blanket, perfect.
So what do you think? You guys set up not too badly?
Yeah, the big thing is the wind.
Yeah.
The wind comes like this.
Well, this dead tree was about to fall over and I was trying to break some branches off it. And I thought, why bring the branches if I could bring the whole tree?
I'm gonna hike with him. No pressure for you guys, but I see the campers beside you have smoke already.
Grant hurries back with firewood. Minutes later, Team B has its own toasty fire going, and not a minute too soon. The rain is starting to come down.
Very nice.
Perfect.
It's very nicely done.
Yeah. Good job, gang. Congratulations.
Nice.
We're going to call it a day. We've got our shelter built, fire's going, and we're going to climb in.
Both camps are up and running in less than an hour. They may not be five-star accommodation, but they serve their purpose, keeping SAR members and their subjects warm and dry until help arrives.
Today now they've easily picked up on how to build a fire, where to find wood, how to build a shelter, and from what we see here and what they've got set up, they're easily set up to be able to spend the night.
Callout Search and Rescue features real stories filmed live by search and rescue teams during actual missions. Today on Callout, Whistler SAR searches for 3 skiers who went missing overnight in the cold mountains.
They had a 50th birthday party in Squamish, and they didn't show, the 3 of them, so it's quite suspicious.
Tuesday, 8:30 a.m. Whistler SAR is gearing up for an early morning aerial search.
We're here at the Whistler heliport. We have 3 overdue skiers, so we're just getting a rescue team together here.
The call-out came the previous day just before nightfall. Barry Armstrong, Tom Honey, and Larry Klein, all experienced backcountry skiers, had left Monday morning for a quick run on the slopes behind Whistler Mountain, a popular out-of-bounds area. When they failed to return by late afternoon in time for Tom's 50th birthday dinner, their spouses began to worry.
I tried Larry's phone, tried Barry's phone, tried Tom's phone, nobody was answering. That was the first indication that something was wrong.
This call-out has a personal impact for several members of the search and rescue team as well. After all, Whistler is a small community.
I've known Barry for quite a few years, probably 15, 20. I actually had personal knowledge of one of the subjects. He was a friend of mine, and I knew him to be certainly proficient in backcountry skiing and very knowledgeable of the area. So it was a mystery somewhat how they could be lost.
If they're in the backcountry.
A mystery that does not bode well. Why have 3 responsible, experienced men, all carrying cell phones and only going out for a few hours in a well-traveled area, disappeared into the night without a word?
Being that close to civilization, even if one had been injured, one of them would have hiked out to get help.
I'm more concerned that something's happened here.
Brad fears the worst. An avalanche may have taken out all 3 men.
Hopefully we're not going there.
But it's too dark to venture out. The team must stand down for the night, a tough call for the searchers and for the subjects' families.
Evening was bad. It was a very bad night. The police said that search and rescue would go out pretty much at dawn, that they would mount a search for them in the morning. So just sat here and waited for light.
So we're just loading up our basket with all our gear now. We've got our helicopter all fueled up and it's starting to get nice and sunny, so hopefully we'll find them quickly.
The helicopter takes off with search and rescue members Gavin Christie, Matty Bodkin, Binti Massey, and team leader Scott Aiken, a certified avalanche technician.
Barry is a pretty good friend of mine and level-headed.
The search team's first task is to identify any evidence of avalanche activity in the area. If they find anything significant, they will land and carry out a probe search, if it's safe to do so. The crew flies over the ridge along the missing skiers' intended route. The trio's plan had been to take the gondola up to the top of Whistler, ski along the ridge, and do some easy runs on Oboe before taking the Singing Pass Trail back to town.
I don't know how they'd go to a birthday party in Squamish by 5 if they come all this way. I agree. I think we'll go and do the primary.
They reach Russet Hut, a small overnight shelter for backcountry adventurers. Beyond the hut is the difficult descent up Thistle Peak, an unlikely route for missing skiers, given their timeline and limited equipment.
No tracks, no avalanches so far.
To everyone's relief, there was no sign of recent avalanche activity.
Certainly some of the terrain that they had to go through on their tour was avalanche terrain, but it wasn't showing much sign of high instability.
And it was ugly out here yesterday. And it was really ugly, yeah.
Ruling out the avalanche factor, the team now believes that poor weather played a key role in the skiers' disappearance.
Because of the foggy weather, I had a pretty good idea that they had gotten drawn a few degrees off of their intended direction, and they had in fact got drawn down into the Cheakamus drainage off the backside.
The helicopter doubles back and flies over the southern side of the ridge, a very rugged, hostile area with rocky cliffs and dense trees. At night, temperatures here can easily drop to -10 degrees Celsius. Poorly equipped backcountry adventurers, even experienced ones, have perished on these mountains in the past. The search team is on the lookout for 3 individual tracks made by downhill skis. It has now been an hour since the crew left the helipad, and still no definite sign of the missing subjects.
That's the sort of confusing part, is why all their cell phones aren't getting anything.
Knowing that this area is still within cell phone range, the team can't understand why no one has heard from the subjects. Then, a break.
Right through the gully here, through the depression. It does look like a party of 3 there. Yeah. Right number of pole plants, and it's definitely an errant track. Yeah, they go right to the top of the gully here. And Starbase from Scotty. Starbase. Okay, yeah, we're just confirming the entrance point was off Flute, exactly where they'd be if they were confused.
What is very odd is that the tracks are not only heading down the wrong side of the mountain range, but they are also 2 kilometers west of the skiers' planned destination, Oboe. The search team follows the tracks down to Cheakamus Lake. Here, the tracks are hidden by trees, making them hard to see from the air. Matty and Binti are deployed onto the frozen lake for a closer look. They will study the tracks to determine how many people were there and how long ago.
We'll check it out for age, and we'll check numbers. Tell you what, I'll go straight in here. And you go.
Some of us get pretty good at counting pole plants because everyone's got the same stride. It's like you can get a sense of how many people are there by the clusters, the numbers of poles.
To age the tracks and distinguish fresh ones from day-olds or more, they will look for various clues.
If you squish down snow and leave a track and it's out there overnight, you're going to get evaporation of the moisture out of the snow, and it'll crystallize just on top of the tracks, even a little tiny bit. That's one way of telling if they're fresh or not. If we do get snow at night, that'll determine whether they're fresh or not, even a little tiny bit of snow.
Maddie and Binti are left to work their way into the forest while the rest of the crew flies over the area in hopes of flushing out the missing subjects.
We're basically making a lot of noise with the helicopter, and then we'll go and search another area and come back hoping that people have heard us and are going to come out into the open and make themselves easy to spot. So that's one of our strategies for aerial search.
Come out wherever you are. Yeah. Okay, Maddie, Scott.
Maddie radios in with his assessment.
Go ahead, Maddie.
Hey, Scotty, I found a track here that matches the profile of the subjects.
Definitely look like someone's on fatter skis heading east, and it definitely, as I go this direction, seeing 3 pole plants indicating a party of 3.
Super, Maddie. You're definitely on the right track. Thanks, bud.
Good news.
We knew that it was 3 people. I had very good confidence that it was 3 people.
Binti confirms this and puts an age on the tracks.
Go ahead, Binti.
We're pretty much sure we got 3 guys headed east here. Yesterday's track, like yesterday afternoon late.
Yeah, okay. That sounds like they're in here somewhere. We'll do a quick cut and come back and get you.
10-4.
Kind of cut back a little.
The odd thing is that given that they were locals, is why they were at the lake edge and going completely the wrong direction. They were going into, literally 100 kilometers of wilderness where they could be turning around and be in civilization within 10 kilometers.
A third indication that the tracks belong to the missing party and not other skiers is their large width. Day trippers who intentionally ski along Cheakamus Lake generally use cross-country skis, which are more narrow than the downhill skis that Barry, Tom, and Larry are all wearing. Now back on board the helicopter, the team is confident that they're hot on the trail of the missing party.
These ski tracks were not narrow tracks, they were fat skis. That's what these are too, they're the fat skis. So obviously someone with downhill skiing objective in mind.
They employ a common technique used in ground search tracking known as sign cutting, where they leapfrog ahead and look for a sign, or in this case, more ski tracks.
Rather than spending the time physically following the tracks, we flew down the lake edge about 2 kilometers and right away got on the track again.
Check us eastbound, check this lake. We have 3 tracks.
Once again, Maddie and Binti are dropped off. Running low on fuel, the rest of the crew heads back to Whistler to switch helicopters. On skis and back in the woods again, Maddie and Binti forge ahead, following the tracks.
It was a very purposeful track. It wasn't the kind of track where you thought someone was lost. It wasn't, sort of here and there and everywhere. It was just a beeline.
Suddenly, a change in direction. The tracks are now climbing straight up the side of the mountain into some very ugly terrain.
It's a searcher's bit of a nightmare when they go up. So now we're in heavy, heavy forest, old growth timber, and they're heading up. So we had to put on our touring gear and start chasing after them and go a little bit faster than they're going.
The searchers push on, knowing by the freshness of the tracks that the subjects must be very close.
We went up, and next thing you know, I crossed a fresh track of someone skiing down.
So Maddie went down the hill chasing this one track, and I continued going back up the hill.
Hello, anyone out there?
I called out, and the subject called back to me, and I skied down to him immediately, and he identified himself as being Barry.
The other 2 guys were on their way back down. It's just that they were really tired and wet, and so I just waited and waited and waited and watched them and let them come right to me. They'd followed their track back down, which was good, and yeah, I just waited for them to come to me.
It was really nasty, crusty, thick, awful skiing conditions. Larry's was struggling a bit with skiing, and so I kind of stuck with him to make sure he got down uninjured. By the time we made it, they were waiting for us. I'm Tom. You're probably looking. I think we had hoped to self-extricate before they had become involved. Obviously, we failed to do that.
They're embarrassed. I mean, they're locals. This shouldn't have happened. And, you know, blowing their 50th birthday party, that's never good. And they're frustrated, I'd say, more than anything, but super glad to see us.
On the way back to Cheakamus Lake, the helicopter team gets an update from SAR base.
Apparently they have voice contact. It is the subjects.
It's always a great sound to hear the radio crackle with SAR base. We have located the subjects, particularly when they are friends of yours.
It's music to my ears. Thanks, Ted. All right.
Team leader Scotty Aiken is quick to exit the RCMP helicopter to greet his friend Barry, the first of the 3 missing subjects to reach the lake. Meanwhile, Tom and Larry, who are less experienced skiers, are taking their time coming down the treacherous mountainside under Binty's guidance.
Barry. You got a fire.
Oh, a huge fire. You're a ranger last night.
So, am I staying?
You might as well come. Yeah.
And then he's got less of a load on his next flight out.
It felt humbling for sure. It felt relief because I just wanted to get the hell out. And I knew, seeing the helicopter, one of the biggest things for me was I knew that my wife would know and my daughter would know that we were okay.
With all subjects now safely accounted for, the teasing begins.
My wife didn't sleep that well last night. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I can imagine what my conversation with my wife is when I get home. Oh, well. Tom's 50th birthday. Yeah. Epic.
Barry tries to make sense of where they are.
I still have no idea how we got here. Were those our tracks? Yep.
His internal compass was so turned around that he was really in disbelief that this could be Cheakamus Lake. And that's part of survival psychology, is you latch onto a theory or a belief, and that stays with you to the detriment of your travel direction.
The RCMP helicopter drops Barry at the heliport, then heads back out to extract Tom and Larry. Barry reunites with his elated wife. Tom's wife, Carol, is less forgiving.
Oh, I just got smacked.
I gave him a big hug and smacked him in the back of the head for myself and everybody else that was waiting for him to come home.
Perfect. Hey, I'll call you back in a minute. She was happy to see me, and for sure, but yeah, she was not so kind.
Our final chopper, Air 8, has just come in with our last subjects, and our 2 members were still out there. So it's all going to be a happy ending.
Even though I knew it wasn't going to be possible, I was still hoping right up until the time they picked us up, we'd be able to keep a lid on this and be able to skulk back to the car and drive off. We were all feeling a little bit of embarrassment and regret for having to mobilize these guys. We felt guilty about taking the search and rescue people away from their day jobs. I was feeling incredibly guilty about the people we had caused pain and worry and anguish.
Not quite the happy birthday that had been planned for Tom, but a happy ending nonetheless, thanks to Whistler Search and Rescue.
Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Appreciate that.
They brought a lot of expertise to the table and went right in and found them, which was fantastic. So it was such a special moment to have them come home safe.
You're under 300 bucks.
Everyone is curious to know how these 3 local residents got so turned around. Originally, Barry, Tom, and Larry had only planned to go out for a few short runs down Obo Peak. For this reason, Tom left with even less gear than usual.
I was literally throwing stuff out of my pack the morning of to keep it light, and threw it a compass, threw it a map of the area actually, which is just ridiculous.
Instead, they relied on their previous experience to navigate. However, near whiteout conditions caused them to ski down the southern side of Flute instead of the northern side of Obo. But even when they reached the vast Cheakamus Lake at the foot of the mountain, which they were all familiar with, Barry was still convinced they were on the right path.
It never really dawned on me at any time during the downhill where we were going. I've skied there, well, like I say, probably 20 times, and I had no idea you could get to Cheakamus Lake from the top of Flute, because I never took the time to look at a chart.
They began traveling east, following Barry's belief that they would eventually cross the Singing Pass Trail, which leads back to town.
You know, I really trust these guys, and Barry was very certain about where he was. And he was compellingly certain. And unfortunately, he was wrong.
By early evening, the trio was still trekking through the woods with the same determination.
We trudged on as long as we could, and when it started to get dark, our biggest concern was getting poked in the eye with a stick.
At that point, we decided, hey, better stop for the night and build a fire and start again in the morning.
There was an ever-increasing sense of anxiety because I knew that we were actually not well prepared to spend a night in the cold.
Luckily, the weather had cleared by nightfall. A dry night in the Alpine can make the difference between life and death. But without any camping gear, they had to be resourceful.
The day passes burn like magic. Burn nice hot blue flame, and that was what got the fire going.
If we hadn't burned them, we probably wouldn't have started that fire. And I give a lot of credit to Barry for starting a fire under really difficult conditions.
The fire not only allowed them to stay warm, but also to melt snow for drinking water.
The leftover water bottle is what kept us from getting dehydrated, because plastic water bottles don't cut it when you're trying to warm snow by the fire.
It was nonetheless a very long and very hard night.
No one really got any sleep. I mean, it wasn't that easy to sleep. It was pretty cold.
In the morning, they decided to climb upwards, hoping to intersect the trail more rapidly, or perhaps get cell phone reception.
We were still seeking Singing Pass, which we assumed was just above us.
The terrain turned very ugly. Tom and Larry began questioning Barry's navigation skills.
It was horrible trekking conditions, and that's when our diplomacy started to break down. One guy wanted to go one way, we wanted to go the other way. We were all getting a little short with one another because we just wanted to get the hell out of there.
Fortunately, their difference of opinion was interrupted by the sound of the helicopter searching the valley below.
We knew they'd be looking for us, so we better just get into a place where we can be rescued.
This meant undoing the morning's climbing progress and skiing back down to the lake where they would be visible to the searchers.
It was probably a 25 to 30 minute ski down for me to get down from the tight trees, and it was not a pleasant ski either.
It was a really good feeling when we saw Binti down at the bottom, and I realized I could take it easy for a bit. We were almost near the lake, because I knew then I would survive.
Cold, wet, and hungry, but in good shape, they were promptly whisked home by search and rescue, something for which they're both grateful and regretful.
Could have been way, way worse. And, you know, even as it was, we mobilized a lot of people, consumed a lot of resources that didn't need to happen. And that's very regrettable for us, and if anyone can learn enough to keep themselves out of a tight spot and save some resources and save people putting themselves at risk to save you, please learn that from this.
Callout Search and Rescue features real stories filmed live by search and rescue teams during actual missions. Today on Callout, Nelson's search and rescue raced to the scene of a devastating avalanche that reportedly buried 200 snowmobilers.
Digging up one body's one thing. Digging up 50 or 100, How do you prepare for that?
Saturday, 4:16 p.m. Nelson Search and Rescue were called out to the site of a major incident.
The report is 200 people buried in an avalanche. Seems a bit extreme, but that's what we got. So we're throwing everything together right now in helicopters and getting over there as fast as we can.
A devastating avalanche has struck just outside the city of Revelstoke, reportedly burying 200 people in its deadly path.
When you hear 200 people buried in an avalanche, it doesn't compute. You just don't believe it. It took a long time to wrap my head around it.
In the face of such a large-scale event, teams from all over the region are coming to help. A total of 5 qualified members from Nelson are joining the rescue mission, including Randy Lall and Chris Armstrong, who are in the second of 2 helicopters heading to Revelstoke.
So have we talked to anybody in Revelstoke yet? I've got nothing at all.
There is one question on everyone's mind. How did 200 people get caught in a single slide? With so little information, the team tries to come up with a logical explanation.
You know, outside of a highway accident or an avalanche control issue with a lineup of cars or something like that, I mean, I can't think of anything that would cause this.
Whatever the reason or cause, it's a hard pill to swallow.
It really started to sink a bit, you know, thinking digging up one body's one thing. Digging up 50 or 100, how do you prepare for that?
5:28 p.m. The team arrives in Revelstoke and learns from SAR base that a number of injured have been airlifted from the mountain.
Looks like the last loads are coming in at this time, and information from the airport was that all general public there were transported to the hospital for name tracking. Roger that.
We're hearing on the radio right now that it's actually Snoworama, an event, hill climb, what have you, snowmobilers. Lots of people out running around, and they've had a major event. So we're just gonna wait till we get picked up here. We'll get briefed properly at SAR base, and we'll go from there. It's a big one.
The event in question is the Big Iron Shootout, which takes place every year on Boulder Mountain, a favorite destination among snowmobilers just 2 kilometers west of Revelstoke. In Canada, snowmobiling is an increasingly popular winter sport, with over 700,000 sleds currently registered nationwide. Most recreational snowmobilers ride groomed trails and relatively flat backcountry terrain. The more adventurous ones practice hill climbing, an extreme maneuver in which the goal is to reach the peak by riding, sometimes almost vertically, up the side of a mountain. But snowmobiling in the backcountry is a risky activity, and it can easily trigger avalanches in unstable areas. Across North America, snowmobiles cause on average 200 deaths and 14,000 injuries each year, and are the leading cause of avalanche deaths. For now, the number of casualties resulting from today's avalanche remains unknown.
The worst thing about this is that because it's kind of a free-for-all, there's no organized event in the sense that they don't know how many were there, how many come out, how many people have been hit, how many people haven't. It's going to be quite a big deal to sort it all out.
There isn't much that search and rescue teams can do until morning, but the RCMP will spend the night canvassing hotels in the area, trying to identify any missing persons and piecing together what happened from eyewitness accounts. As reported, hundreds of people of all ages had gathered at the foot of Boulder Mountain earlier that day for the Big Iron Shootout, an annual snowmobile drag racing competition.
In the morning we got there at probably about 6 in the lineup. That was kilometers and kilometers long, and we just rode up. I was a spectator with most of the guys up there.
After the event was done, about 200 snowmobilers moved to nearby Turbo Bowl to watch a small group of daredevils take on the steep slopes of Turbo Hill.
We've just been watching people on their modded turboed sleds, just seeing how far they could climb.
The challenge is to reach the top of a very steep mountain or leave the highest mark, a practice known as high marking.
What we were watching and what some of these machines were doing was kind of mind-boggling, and that's probably what attracted us to go watch more of it.
Despite avalanche warnings issued that morning, many chose to park right near the base of the hill, the least safe spot in Turbo Bowl.
You always feel safe in numbers. Everybody else is there. It must be a good spot to sit.
2:45 p.m. As the crowd settled in to watch the informal competition, some began questioning the stability of the snow.
When we came into the area, I felt a little uneasy about the way the terrain looked. So we kind of parked facing outward, so it was really easy for us to get out of the area.
We were there maybe 7-8 minutes, sitting right in the middle of the crowd, and I was with my 4 buddies, and we kind of thought, you know, this doesn't look good. Let's head out of here early, beat everybody down, shower up, go out for the night. And I was just putting my pack on, and at the corner of my eye, I seen the cornice break and the mountain fracture, and I just ran back to my sled.
The fracture, triggered by high marking, was captured on video by spectator Kevin Tandy.
It was the first guy I started filming, and he just about made it to the top, went to do a turn, and the avalanche came down.
I wasn't too worried at first, and then I realized this thing's really picking up speed and gathering more snow, and it created such a huge head. Snow was spitting out the bottom. We realized it's time to get out of here.
Within a matter of seconds, everyone had revved up their machines and was racing towards the trees for shelter.
You could hear people screaming, sleds starting, sleds crashing into sleds, and then the snow, you could hear the thunder of the snow coming down.
Unleashed from the top of the mountain, the avalanche had picked up both speed and mass, and a wall of snow came crashing down on the crowd.
Just as I came to a stop in a tree wall, I looked back and I saw it just engulf the rest of the group that was back at the bottom of the hill.
I actually wasn't hit by the avalanche, but the sheer wind pushed me off into the tree, and I believe, if I remember correctly, I missed the slide path by 10 feet.
Others weren't so lucky.
This slide hit us in a matter of seconds, and it hit with such a force, like it blew the gloves, my helmet, it blew my pack open. It was like incredible impact, and I went under.
It was dark and there was snow packed everywhere. Like I remember I couldn't even close my hand to make a fist. But I couldn't feel which way was up, which way was down.
Fortunately, both men had one arm sticking out of the snow and were able to dig themselves out. What they saw once at the surface was a horrifying scene.
I looked around where there was hundreds of people, and now there was none, just carnage. There was so many people missing and so much going on. I was just in utter daze, like a shock.
All I could think about was where everybody else was, because now I knew I could breathe, but then I was panicking about everybody else, so.
Despite the shock and confusion, everyone instantly leaped into action.
There was already a guy organizing people. He was telling people to turn their beacons to search.
Just start probing. Let a guy go with the peach.
It was like organized chaos almost. Everyone kind of just looked at each other, grabbed shovels, grabbed probes, turned their beacons to search, and went to work.
Even the injured stepped in and helped as best they could.
I got back up, knew something was wrong with my shoulder right away. Got the shovel out, my probe out, handed it to the next guy that didn't have one. So here, use this. Use the shovel and probe. I'm gonna start with this peep search and help the guys with that.
Individuals with probes immediately spread out in a line across Turbo Bowl, jabbing the snow to feel for buried victims. Whenever their transceivers, also referred to as peeps, detected a signal, they would focus the probing in that one spot until they hit something. Then start digging.
I glanced back to where I just come from, and I realized I seen a hand there. I was digging in the front of his chest, and I hit something, and it was a boot. It was a small child's boot, and it moved. Like that was amazing. Like it was a good feeling, but a bad feeling. What else is down there?
The boy and the man both survived. Many others also owe their lives to the quick actions of their peers.
I was helping dig a guy out. He had some sleds on him and he had collapsed on the left side. He was having a hard time breathing. So as they were moving stuff off of him, I actually laid under him to help keep everything aligned and so he could breathe easier.
But it wasn't long before an unresponsive casualty was found.
In a matter of 5 minutes, we had found one guy with a probe, and we all started digging as fast as we could, and we ended up getting him out in about 10 minutes, but he was deceased when we pulled him out.
I was checking for pulse, noticed he had a wedding ring. I mean, you immediately think, this guy's married, you know, does he have kids? You just do whatever you can for him.
Megan and Kristen, both trained in first aid, kept their emotions in check and focused on giving the subject CPR.
The adrenaline was definitely pumping. There's people telling us to stop, but you can't stop. I can't anyways. His friends were there. I couldn't just give up, and I didn't want to give up.
3:50 p.m. Help from the outside began arriving.
It took probably about an hour before any helicopters to arrive on scene. We loaded him into the helicopter. We continued doing CPR until we got to the tarmac and a paramedic told us to stop.
The man was pronounced deceased. Helicopters continued to evacuate the many injured and stranded snowmobilers off Boulder Mountain. Survivors who were able to ride their sleds were told to leave the area due to the potential for more avalanches.
I just kind of sat back on my knees and some tears, some emotion. It was just beyond belief how many people come out of that in such good shape. Like it's just, it's unbelievable.
Everybody pretty much held it together to do what they had to do. The rest of my team, when I saw them back at the hotel, everyone was just sore, exhausted, shock pretty much. Just everybody was still in shock.
Sunday, 9:02 a.m.
So we're at Selkirk Mountain Helicopters right now. This is a staging area for most of the aircraft that'll be flying into the site. There's teams here from Revelstoke and Nelson at the moment. Other teams are already up. Other teams are coming in.
Joining the SAR teams on this massive search and recovery effort are Avalanche dog teams and qualified individuals from Parks Canada, the Canadian Avalanche Association, as well as from various local resorts and heli-skiing companies. Although there hasn't been any missing person reports since the incident, the police still cannot confirm that everyone at the event has been accounted for. But one thing is certain, the avalanche did not bury 200 victims as initially rumored. From the air, the snow-covered peak of Boulder Mountain looks peaceful, but a closer look shows otherwise.
You know, I didn't think much of it until we landed. I got out, we unloaded the crew, kind of settled into our gear cache, and then I had a real good look around. And that's when I realized that all that stuff out there when we flew in wasn't trees sticking out of the snow. It was backpacks, helmets, gloves, pieces of sleds. It seemed unimaginable that you wouldn't find somebody left behind.
Several search crews from Parks Canada are already on site, combing the area with a RECO detector, which is capable of picking up signals from electronic chips.
It reflects off of a chip that may be in a person's clothing, and it gets a signal that tells you whether there's a piece of equipment, their buried sled, a RECO chip in clothing, anything like that.
The initial morning search has so far uncovered one victim. The death toll now stands at 2.
All this ridge line here is what is released. And this has all come down to this point.
The scale is impressive. The deposit in the runout zone, where the debris is collected, spans 140 meters across and 500 meters lengthwise, over an area roughly the size of 11 football fields. The depth of the deposit is anywhere from 2.5 meters to an astounding 5 meters.
Now that we're here, our team is going to be matched up with dog handlers and some of the other folks who have been on the site for a while.
The idea was to get the dogs on the site, get them to search the whole area. We would stand back at the sidelines with shovel and probes. If they had any indication, they would mark the area with small flags. We would come in with the probes, probe the whole area around the flags where they had indication, and if need be, start digging.
Using avalanche dogs is the fastest way to locate a subject who is not carrying a transceiver. These specially trained dogs can easily locate human scent pools under 2 to 4 meters of compact snow. Before long, the dogs pick up a scent in several spots.
Dog sensed something here, and so we're doing a 3-meter diameter circle around it to see if there's actually anything buried here.
1:30 p.m. The digs so far have not uncovered any human remains, only buried snowmobiles and other debris.
Lots of debris, all kinds of things spread around is making it very difficult for dog searching, but that dog's just trying to cover off any likely areas at this point in time.
The avalanche dogs cannot distinguish between a buried object carrying human scent, such as a helmet, and an actual buried victim. Anything with human scent has to therefore be cleared from the site.
We've got the manpower here to dig it out. The more machinery we can get to the surface, the more we get off of the debris, the better for the dogs to work and do a final pass, and we can be feeling really comfortable that there's nothing in there that is of human nature.
Teams are just going onto the debris field and they're removing everything that's movable by hand. Everything else is being flown up by the helicopter, one after the other. They have a special sling set up for these sleds, so the 2 hit the skis, 1 hits the rear, all comes into a focal point on the long line.
One by one, the sleds are cleared off the mountain. It's a strenuous and time-consuming process. The machines are brought to a helicopter hangar nearby, where they are individually tagged by the RCMP. The public will eventually be allowed to come and claim their damaged sleds. The RCMP is also collecting data on the depth and GPS locations of each recovery hole, then marking them with spray paint so they can be visible from the air. The aerial photographs and any other documentation or evidence found at the scene will provide crucial information to the RCMP and BC Coroner Service investigations. 2:45 p.m. It has now been 24 hours since the avalanche was unleashed on this mountain, and the outlook is a little less grim.
The RCMP told us that everyone had been accounted for and that there wasn't anyone missing at that time. There was a lot of people from down in the States, from out east, so there was a chance that someone could still be out there. But at that point, they were pretty confident that everyone was accounted for.
Despite this, the teams will do their due diligence and continue to sweep the area over the next few days. Avalanche experts are now classifying this incident as a size 3 avalanche, an avalanche powerful enough to destroy a small building. During the week leading up to this incident, the Canadian Avalanche Centre had issued a warning that the risk of an avalanche in the Alpine was high, a 4 out of 5 on the danger scale, and that human-triggered avalanches were likely. The warning had effectively dissuaded hundreds of snowmobiling fans from coming to this event.
I think the biggest mistake myself and everyone made was the fact that we knew the avalanche potential was there, but we probably ignored the possibility of how fast it would come. We should have been sitting well off the slide path.
I'm usually pretty safe in the backcountry, but I think I was caught up in the awe of watching what was going on and wasn't paying attention to what I should have been paying attention to.
Tragically, 2 people were killed on Boulder Mountain, and 31 others were hospitalized. But given that there were 200 people on the mountain, the outcome could have been much worse.
Seeing all that debris, all that carnage, it's a miracle that only 2 people were killed.
What would have been one of the worst avalanche accidents in Canadian history was narrowly averted thanks to the quick response of many rescue-ready snowmobilers.
After that slide happened, whether they should have been there or not, all those people got together and they took care of business. Who knows how many people could have been killed if they didn't react the way they did. We didn't do a rescue on this call. We were just doing cleanup. The real rescue was done by them.
Callout Search and Rescue features real stories filmed live by search and rescue teams during actual missions. Today on Callout, Whistler SAR races into the backcountry to rescue a severely injured pro snowmobiler.
You're just going to need to keep your eyes open, okay? Just keep talking to us.
And later, searching for subjects in the Cheakamus River.
Okay, looks like code 4, but can you join the RCMP with your gear and hunker down there when we come back on?
Saturday, 11:30 a.m. Whistler SAR members Gavin Christie and Binti Massey are out for an afternoon of recreational snowmobiling when they receive an urgent page from SAR base.
We looked at the page, it said a broken femur, urgent, Brandywine area. Binti and I looked at each other and knew right then our day was over. We called into SAR base to get some more details on what the mission was.
Chris Brown, a Whistler local, has crashed into a tree while performing a challenging stunt for an extreme snowmobile video. He's seriously injured and in need of evacuation from Brandywine Meadows.
With our knowledge of the area, knowing there's only 2 routes to the Alpine out of Brandywine, we quickly surveyed our area that we were in and checked with the other groups of snowmobilers right in our area that everyone was okay. At that time, we assumed that it was going to be Brandywine Bowl.
They race off to Brandywine Bowl, an 8-kilometer sled ride through the backcountry. 15 minutes later, they arrive on scene.
We saw a large group of people with film equipment scattered around, snowmobiles halfway up the slope. We assumed that this was our location and our subject would be found at the bottom of the cliff.
Further up the hill, sandwiched between a large fir tree and a 20-meter cliff face, lies Chris Brown. His snowmobile sticking straight up out of the snow beside him. Earlier that day, Chris Brown and another pro big mountain rider had been performing some daring stunts for a film production crew. Big jumps and even bigger drops were making for some spectacular footage. But when Chris attempted a near vertical double drop between large fir trees off the 20-meter cliff, something went seriously wrong. Chris's friends rushed to his side and soon realized the severity of the accident.
I'm really bad, dude. My back is broken. Pelvis is broken.
Call 911, tell them to come up to Brandywine Bowl ASAP.
Yeah, sounds like broken hip, bunch of broken stuff. Need a heli very fast.
12:05 p.m. A rescue helicopter takes off from Whistler Heliport and heads to Callahan Country Resort to pick up search manager Brad Sills. Then to the Olympic Park to pick up Nordic ski patroller Tavo Martin.
Understanding the immediacy of the medical response, we called upon Whistler Olympic Park, the closest facility with first aid attendants, to respond to the accident scene.
Back at Brandywine Bowl, Binti heads up to assess the subject, while Gavin remains down below to clear sleds and equipment and prepare for the rescue helicopter, which is due to arrive within minutes.
It's important to have a clear area for the helicopter to land, as well as a reference point for the pilot to see. As he comes into land with all that fresh powder, he basically creates his own whiteout, and without a reference, can easily flip the helicopter and crash.
There was people helping, lots of people to help, so I tried to delegate some people to help dig out a platform for a stretcher, because I knew we were going to have to do that right away. We got his helmet off. You could see that he was really broken up and that his pelvis was definitely broken. His leg was broken, his ankle was broken. He didn't seem to sustain any head injury or neck injury, which is good, but you never know that because you break your pelvis, and I think that kind of pain is so intense that you won't feel anything wrong with your head or your neck and the, your other extremities.
Vinty was by my side the whole time. He took my vitals and he assessed me, and I just kept asking for painkillers. That's all I wanted. I was shaking and freezing, but I just said, hey, can someone get me some painkillers? But he couldn't administer anything because he's not a doctor, and it could affect me when I got to the hospital.
Binty does his best to keep Chris calm, reassuring him that help is on the way.
It's painful to watch and that you really can't do much, and you do need to move him. And moving someone like that who's that broken up without medication is, yeah, it's hard to do.
Twice, actually, I remember someone saying, the heli's here, I hear it, I hear it. And I was just like, oh, thank God.
Moments later, Brad and Tavo set down in the landing zone.
Way up behind the top tree, they've cut a stairway up there, and Binty's calling the pain 10 out of 10 on him.
Okay, so Tavo, you want to go up and do primary? So arriving on scene, I dispatched the first aid attendant to attend to the subject along with Binty. The subject was in a lot of pain. There was a lot of screaming and a lot of anxiety by everybody attending to the scene.
Feeling otherwise, do you have any pain anywhere else? Just freezing? Okay. Freezing.
I wanted to close my eyes and go to sleep and kind of forget about it all because I was in excruciating pain. And I knew it wasn't going to be a quick exit out of there.
Chris, you're going to need to keep your eyes open, okay? Just keep talking to us. I don't want to talk. You don't want to talk? Okay, so just talk to you.
He was in shock, and shock is a killer. And he started to get quiet on us. And, it's almost better to have him screaming his head off than go dead quiet.
At some point, I wasn't sure if I was going to die from bleeding internally. I knew my other injuries weren't going to kill me, but I thought the bleeding could. I could feel it was getting worse. It was starting to fill my abdomen. All I could think about was my family, my girlfriend, my 2 daughters that I need to take care of. So whatever happens, I'm going to live. So dying's not an option.
Hey Brad, we're just getting ready to put our subject onto the backboard, and well, looks like we'll be moving downhill soon. Binty's inquiring, is the chopper prepped?
Yep, Murdoch and I will go over that again here now.
Yeah, copy.
As we were attending to Chris Brown, there was quite a danger of snowfall coming down, avalanches, or further deadfall coming down from the tree that he had just hit with a snowmobile. It was always in the back of our minds. We knew we had to get Chris out of there.
Just getting him on the board now.
Getting the backboard under me and getting me strapped into it was a nightmare. The pain was unbearable. When just moving me at all, I could feel every bone grinding every time they'd move me. I was trying not to yell, but I was just like, keep me level.
Chris is slowly carried down the steep slope. The film crew works ahead to widen the switchback trail to allow for a smooth descent.
How you doing, Chris?
That was a huge bonus to have a lot of manpower. Digging that whole pathway back down to the flats and to the helicopter was awesome.
I just remember being in the helicopters. I don't remember talking. People were taking my vitals. I just kept begging for painkillers. That's all I remember.
Tavo escorts Chris to the Whistler heliport, where an ambulance will take him to the local hospital.
It's over, just like that. And then we all just look around like, oh my God, what just happened? That was a nasty one.
So this is the day. It snowed 10 feet in 10 days where we ride. There's massive mountains here, no tracks for as far as you can see. You won't see tracks.
It all started with a film crew in Whistler to shoot an extreme snowmobile action movie. Chris, having starred in several snowmobile videos, was eager to be featured. The increased profile would keep his sponsors happy and attract business to his company, ridewithchrisbrown.com.
Jeff and I arranged to go with the filmers, and we figured we could bang out 2 segments each in 2 days. That was the goal.
Extreme snowmobile films feature big-name riders performing seemingly impossible stunts with relative ease. Audiences are taken along for the ride in fast-paced, adrenaline-fueled sequences.
One guy, say Jeff, would do a huge drop or a big line somewhere, and I'd want to one-up him, so I'd do something gnarlier, and that's kind of how it works. You feed off each other. Like, you definitely want to see each other push it. You know, you're kind of scaring yourself because you know you're pushing the envelope, you're on the edge, but you know you're in control at the same time.
Backcountry athletes like that step it up and constantly think that they're going to step it up a little bit more, and it's not the same. They need to go a little bit higher, a little bit further, and their sponsors expect it, and they're being filmed, and you know, having a camera on you pushes you beyond your level. Yeah, things can go wrong.
There are obvious risks associated with the sport, such as being caught in avalanches or falling into hidden crevasses and tree wells. But pro snowmobilers have years of experience under their belts.
I know it doesn't seem like we're safe, the things that the lines are doing and the jumps and the cliffs, but to us it's safe because we've done it so many times. I would compare it to Formula 1 racing or any kind of racing where you're going fast, where you don't just hop in a fast car and do laps and win races. You start slow. You start on little tracks, and you start in slower cars, and you work your way up. We don't just jump on turbo snowmobiles and jump off huge cliffs. We definitely started with little mellow slopes, little jumps, and we've worked our way up. But a guy driving a Formula 1 race car is definitely on the edge, just like we are. If he's not pushing the envelope, he's not going to win. And we're not trying to win or anything, but that's part of the fun. I don't think every race car driver is doing it just to win. I think they do it because it gets their adrenaline pumping.
Even so, professional snowmobilers ride a fine line when performing many of these stunts.
With the experience that I've garnered over 35 years in search and rescue is that, you know, if you live that close to the edge, eventually you're going to fall off.
There was a cliff I had done the year before. I figured I could do it again, and we'd get different angles on it, make it look better. I went about 120, 125 feet or so on it this year. I disappeared into the powder on the landing, and then came out and bounced and landed, and I was stoked. All right, what's next? Now what can I do?
Didn't feel a thing.
I'm looking up the hill, and I see a double, maybe a triple line even, where it's like drop one, and then drop a bigger one, and then a bigger one, all in a line.
Chris rides to the top of the hill to assess the terrain and determine whether or not he can pull off the stunt.
Both filmers had set up for me to do it. So they kind of assumed I was going to do it. And they said, "Are you going to do it, Brown? You think you're going to do it?" I said, "Well, I'm 70%. Well, no pressure or anything, you know, you don't have to do it, but if you did it, it'd be the sickest shot of the year." So I said, "Okay, I'll do it." And I'm not blaming anybody but myself for any of this. I told the filmers I was doing it, so be ready. And as I was coming down to the first one, I said, "Okay, go slower, go slower, go slower." And I kind of held the brakes and slid down the first one and landed quite a bit shorter, maybe 10 feet shorter than I had planned. Snow came over my head because it was so deep, and it stuck to my goggles. And then I bounced. Snow came over my head again, and I immediately went off the next one. And the snow cleared from my goggles. And all I see is this massive Douglas fir tree right in front of me. And I came down the tree, breaking all these huge limbs with my body. And then I ended up in the tree well, head first on my back with snow in my helmet, and I can't see and I can't breathe. So I'm pushing snow up to get an air path, and finally I broke through, pulled the snow out of my helmet, and was able to breathe. And I just tried to push my head up, and I said, oh no, my back's broken. And then I tried to twist, and my pelvis just twisted like this. And then I started to push off my feet, and it felt like my foot was backwards. And I can feel a warm, like burning sensation in my abdomen. At that point, I knew I was really hurt. I'm bleeding internally. I can feel it.
Luckily for Chris, his friends and colleagues were close by and able to call search and rescue. Safe in hospital, Chris has a long road to recovery ahead of him.
Now it's been 7 months. I'm lucky I'm alive. I feel like my recovery's way ahead of where it could be. You know, the doctors told me it'd be years before I did anything. But I'm hiking, I'm biking, I'm gonna be riding my snowmobile in a couple months. I'm not gonna be doing big, huge cliffs anymore. I don't need to. That's over. This definitely taught me a lesson, for sure.
Now, searching for subjects in the Cheakamus River.
You want to be positive, but we really know in our hearts that it's not going to be a good outcome.
Saturday, 2:40 p.m. It's late summer, and Whistler Search and Rescue was called out to the Cheakamus River, where 2 people were seen being swept into the fast-flowing water. Gavin Christie, a certified swiftwater rescue technician, is tasked to drive the Whistler SAR truck to the river, but there's a problem.
Probably been 6 weeks without a call, and we're not practicing during the summertime, so when I showed up to the SAR base and hopped into the truck, I turned the keys and nothing happened. Dead battery. So I quickly unloaded some gear and put it into my personal vehicle and used that to drive down to the scene.
Search and rescue from Whistler Search and Rescue.
Gavin is joined by SAR manager Darren Romano, and they head south towards the Cheakamus River, about a 20-minute drive from Whistler. While en route, they receive a discouraging update from Squamish Search and Rescue, who are already on scene.
Quick here, looks like code 4, but can you join the RCMP with your gear?
They informed me that they had found one person kind of laying in a little bit of water and not moving at all.
It's tough. You don't want to get too pessimistic going into it because you'll start thinking negatively and that can impact your performance. So you want to be positive, but we really know in our hearts that it's not going to be a good outcome.
Squamish SAR has called in a helicopter equipped with a long line to assist in the recovery of the deceased subject. Also on scene is veteran Whistler search manager Brad Sills, who consults with Darren on the challenges of this mission. Another helicopter has arrived to help search for the second subject, and they dispatch a team to fly down the river from the point last seen.
We searched with the helicopter over the river. We also had people searching on the side of the river to see if the other subject had a chance to get ashore safely.
So many places somebody could hang up in here.
After several hours of aerial searching up and down the river, both the helicopter and ground SAR members who have been scouring the banks are instructed to stand down for the day.
The next morning, we started flying the river again early morning because we'd have a different angle of light into the water, and we were hoping that we might be able to see into places that we couldn't before because of the glare off the water.
When you're helicopter searching, you can adjust the rotor pitch such that it blows the bush back from the shoreline, and it gives you a very good vantage point up onto the shoreline.
Move these bushes back a bit.
One of the dangerous things about doing a river search of that nature, and we're so close to the water, if there was any mechanical issues with the helicopter, the pilot doesn't even have time to warn you that something's going wrong because he's got his hands full. There's thick bush on either side. There's no hope of him being able to go to a safe spot. It's going to be parked in the river.
That'd be a good one for the boys in the kayaks to search.
Yeah. When the helicopter search team comes upon a catchment that could potentially trap a body underwater, swiftwater technicians are transported by helicopter to take a closer look.
We insert the kayaks by long line and set the paddlers down as close as we can to their kayaks. Here in British Columbia, our rivers tend to be very fast-moving, white water, and very, very cold.
It's simply not feasible for searchers to sweep the entire length of the river on kayaks and catarafts.
Our subjects tend to get hung up in wood and in eddies and backwaters and that sort of thing. And basically that's why most subjects that are lost in rivers around here are never found.
Keeping a lot of stuff in. Yeah, this is, we were looking at this a lot yesterday. You could definitely be under there. Oh, yeah.
As they progress downriver towards Daisy Lake, it becomes nearly impossible to see through the water.
The river turns into Class 5 whitewater, and the surface is completely white for the entire 7-kilometer stretch.
After 6 hours of intensive searching on day 2, SAR managers decide to suspend the search indefinitely.
Winding up a swiftwater call is often very difficult because, unlike land searches, the chance of survivability is typically far less, and so the outcome is usually not very gratifying.
Unfortunately, our best efforts came up dry, and the subject has still not been recovered. We just have to live with that.
Callout Search and Rescue features real stories filmed live by search and rescue teams during actual missions.